I'm going to open us up where I said I was going to leave us off from last week, and that is I want you to go around your table, and I want you to review what were the four components of the manhood, authentic manhood definition. And if you think, man, I don't remember it. If you can't name them all, look at page 44. It's got them written out. But before you do that, try to name them all. And I want you to share your favorite quote. Your favorite quote, either from the book or from any manhood quote. I love the John Wayne one in there. I think I mentioned that last week. But one of the ones that just stuck out with me as a man quote is, it's actually a Chinese proverb. It says, "The man who says it cannot be done should not bother the man who is doing it." And I was just like, oh, man, I want to be the guy doing it. So go around the tables, quote, and or go into the what are the four qualities of it. Man, I'm waking up today. So I'm going to get a water and hydrate my brain and go. You got 3 minutes, so don't linger. All right, well, we're going to jump in. If you got your book, get to page 58. And before we do that, let me just have you finish all four of these qualities that we mentioned last week. The definition of an authentic man. Number one is to reject what? Reject. Okay, now we're going to actually not be passive, and we're going to say that out loud. So the first one is to reject, to accept, to lead, and invest. Very good. So that definition we're going to come back to this week, next week, but we're going to add to that and kind of expand and add a little depth and richness to it with the next 2 weeks, and that is look at the faces of manhood, and we're going to kind of combine these together and expand and complement what we're looking at. Number 2 on page 58, unfortunately, society has often depicted masculinity as one-dimensional. And in that one dimension, I want us to just name a couple pieces here. If you were to come up with an adjective for the way that TV or movies depict men, what are some of the adjectives men are what? Violent, absolutely. What's another one? And it's across the gamut. I would say they depict them as morons or weak or whatever in a lot of TV show. Emasculated, absolutely. What's another adjective that we can see men described as on TV or in movies? In the way, yeah. A necessary evil. They're just in the way, yeah, absolutely. Any others come to mind? I know it's early. But yeah, that's a great example of the way society portrays men. But the truth is, number 3, we need a biblically based, broad masculinity that is multidimensional. The kind of masculinity that can move into multiple settings and express itself appropriately and powerfully when needed. And that's what we're going to look at here in these 2 faces, that we can see that through these faces, we're going to see this definition of authentic manhood kind of come to life. The 2 we're going to look at today, and then we'll look at 2 more next week, is the king face and the warrior face. And we're going to look at them and then discuss each of them as we go through it. The first one, the king face, and we're going to look at some of the qualities of what it looks like to have the king face. And every one of us has all 4 of these, but every one of us will have it in different measures, in different applications and different blends, and to have them though, and we'll look at the balance of them as well. So number 1, and we're going to ask the question in just a minute to discuss which of these qualities really kind of sticks out to you. Number 1, the king face reflects righteous energy, characterized by strong conviction, courageous moral choices, servant spirit, and righteous leadership. Its essence is providing for others and loving what is right. That's kind of that righteous energy. You look at it and think of nobility, but the idea of this is the standard. Number 2, the king face is primarily associated with integrity. Integrity. I'll not forget putting on this face in my mid-20s. I was in sales and marketing. I was in the top 10 in sales at a Fortune 500 growth company. And I was really, there was a lot more going on to it, but I was just really inside thinking, is this really what I want to do the rest of my life? And that was kind of answered through a situation that came up with my boss. I had 1 month where I did not hit the top 10 and I dropped into the top 15, and my boss just reamed me for it. And I thought, that's a little odd because I got a lot in the pipeline. I'm going to have a phenomenal month next month. And then he said this, and it changed everything. He said, Ken, you're a nice guy, and nice guys finish last. And I was like, what? And there had been a particular sale that the company that was buying from us had said, listen, we want to do this. You want to buy your system, but I've got to know for a fact that it's going to be installed. And he gave me a date. So I did my diligence, went back to engineering, and I said, hey, can we honor this date? Can we realistically say we can get it done on that date? And they came back and they said, no, it'll be at least a week and a half, 2 weeks after that. And I'm like, all right. So I told them, and the company said, hey, we really want to do it, but we're going to have to go back and see if we got other options or whatnot. So it didn't lose the sale, but it definitely did not make the sale at that point. And my boss said, you know what? You leave when you come to work, leave your integrity at home. And I was like, what? He says, you tell them whatever they want to hear in order to make that sale. And that broke inside of me. And I was like, no. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back, but it was the final piece of the decision. I literally drove home from that meeting, wrote my resignation, said I'm taking 2 weeks vacation, then I'll give my 2 weeks notice, but I'm done. And I just thought, I don't want to live in that. And that's kind of what putting on that king face is, that conflict of, do what I do when I'm here, or am I committed to what is right no matter what, that integrity piece. So number 3, you can look at this great examples of the king face, both in the New Testament. Nathan and King David, we're going to look at those two a second. But I want to just, if you're not familiar with the story, David becomes king. He slays Goliath. He goes through a whole thing with Saul, but he is now king of Israel. And he's doing a lot of great. He's leading his armies, and he makes a decision. You know what? I'm going to take a break. He decides, I'm not going to lead courageously right now. I'm going to do some R&R. I'm going to just send the army out. And when we get passive, bad things happen. And he gets on top of the palace, and he looks out, and there's a woman bathing. She's beautiful. He says, bring her here. And Bathsheba comes over, and he sleeps with her, gets her pregnant. And he's like, man, instead of owning it, he covers it. He sends for her husband to come back from the front lines, who is a totally devoted soldier, Uriah. And he goes, hey, go sleep with your wife. And he goes, how could I do this? I can't do that evil. My men are on the battlefield. You called me. I'm here. What do you want to tell me? And he wouldn't sleep with his wife. He wouldn't go inside the house because he's like, I'm in battle mode here. And David's he's perplexed. He's like, well, now I can't cover up mine so that he'll think it's his. And so he sends him back to the front line, but he sends him with a note. And he sends him with a note to the commander, and he says, hey, send Uriah up to the front lines. And as soon as he gets there, withdraw. And basically he dies in battle because David sets him up to be killed. And I love the way that this face comes on, the king's face of Nathan. Nathan was a prophet and advisor. And he goes into King David, and he gives him this story about a sheep. One man had 100 sheep, one had one. And the man who had 100 took the one from the other one and destroyed the sheep. And he says, what should be done to that man? And he said, well, that man should be killed. He should be held account. And he says, oh, that man is you. You're the man. And he just, what? And it brought it all out. So Nathan put on the king's face and says, hey, I'm going to risk conflict, and you can hate me, you can kill me too, but I'm telling you, this is wrong. And in conflict, they take that confrontation. That's the king face. But David also decided at that point to put on the king face. And it says David was a man after God's own heart. Well, God's own heart is not adultery and murder. That is not God's heart. But what his heart did next, He didn't excuse it. He didn't compromise it. He didn't rationalize it, and he didn't repeat it. What he did was he confessed it. And he took the blame, and he took the heat, and he repented, and he confessed and said, Lord, what do I got to do? And there is consequences to that. And he suffered those consequences the rest of his life. But that heart of the king face going, you know what? I'm not perfect. I'm going to do what's right regardless. So number 4, the king's face is also associated with leadership, the desire to promote harmony, provision, protection, anticipates, defines direction, charts wise courses. And I'm not going to get political, but you can go back and you can look at several places. When does any country thrive? It's when there is a strong leadership that is walking by integrity and planning and providing and protecting and creating that. Underneath number 5, the characters. Here's the kind of the extremes of both. And God calls us to be really balanced in this, that if a man's king face is pushed too far or out of balance, he can become a bully, a tyrant, or a dictator. This is the tyrant end of that spectrum. If a man does not have enough of the king face, he struggles with compromise, and he's the compromiser, if you will, in this. The king face is leading with integrity. Leading with integrity. So what I want to do in this is ask these questions. What are a few one-dimensional stereotypes of masculinity? We kind of hit that, just kind of review that. But review the 4 qualities mentioned here. Actually, there's 6 that it goes an overview on for a healthy king face. What quality do you feel is most important out of those in the king face piece? And then I would say I'm going to add one to it before we get to this last one. The last one is going to be where I want to just kind of have everybody share one of them. But what part of the authentic man definition, what 1 or 2 parts of that really come out of the king face? Is it rejecting passivity, leading courageously, investing eternally? Which 1 or 2 pieces really come out in the king face? Does that make sense? You got about 5 to 7 minutes to go through these, and then name a leader that you think exemplifies these qualities. And it doesn't have to be somebody famous. It can be somebody that you encountered growing up, somebody that you know personally that you think, man, that is somebody that really embodies that. So you got 5 to 7 minutes. Go. A leader impactor sense. Growing up, did you have at any point a teacher or a coach that you looked at and said, that is the leader, that is the king's face, that is somebody that I know is going to do what's right no matter what? Raise your hand if you had one of those. Okay, that's a lot of us. And did anybody have a specific person in their life or that you can look at and go, man, that's somebody that's it? Anybody you can think of? Who's that? A pastor? Okay. Wow. Wow. Yeah. He just a good, very cool. Anybody else? All right. Well, I want to look at the second face here, and even before that, I want to read If you've got a pen, write this one down. It's Psalm 15, verse 4. And it simply says this: but honor those who fear the Lord, who keep his oath even when it hurts. I think that is the king face. Basically, I'm going to show you what's right. I'm going to take this oath. I'm going to do what's right no matter what, even if it hurts. So the second face we're going to look at is and other one I was going to ask, which piece of the authentic manhood definition do you think kind of fit with that face the most? Which of those pieces? of the passivity, leading, courageous, those. Which piece of the definition do you think fits most with the king face? Oh, Ed. Well, it's not more important, but which one lines up with the king face? Okay, they all do. Mmm, it's out of balance. You got, or a napkin. Yeah, that's a great example. That's a great example. Especially with the king face. If you're going to lead, you got to have them all. That's a great point. Well, let's look at the second one, which starts on page 60, and that's the warrior face. And the warrior face reflects courageous energy. It's often characterized by initiative, protection, provision, and I love this one, perseverance. So that's number one. Number two, and you can underline this last word in here, is just the warrior face is primarily associated with initiative. They're the ones that run to the battle. That face is the one that flips and switch inside of us going, I got to do something. I need to do something. Committed to causes bigger than itself. That's the warrior face. Assertive with the truth. Number three, the king's face is what matters most, above comfort. I've been watching the series Band of Brothers again, and it's just like, man, this is what's important. These guys getting shot. I just saw a scene where every one of them's walking around. They're talking to this new replacement, and he's like, man, have you got any of y'all been shot? And any of us, all of us, and he's been shot. And they're just going around, hey, and they're the first ones to get back. You know, I just escaped from the hospital, so now I'm back. And it's just like, man, this is what's important, and just really, really cool. So associated with purpose, number 5, 1 Corinthians 9:24 through 27, run the race. That's the passage that talks about everybody runs a race, but run the race in such a way to win. Fight for the noble things and eternal things. And I want to give a little bit of a correction. On the top of the next page, it says 1 Timothy 11:12, which is amazing and miraculous since there's only 6 chapters in Timothy, 1 Timothy. It should read 1 Timothy 6, verses 11 and 12. But that particular passage is a great, great piece. And I just want to read them real quick. 11 and 12. Man of God, flee all these things that it mentions above and pursue, and here it is, righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. Fight the good fight of faith. Take hold of the eternal life. And that's what God is calling this, is this warrior mindset of I need to be living and passionate and fighting for these pieces of life. And last time we went through this, I came across a speech that Theodore Roosevelt gave in France, April 23rd of 1910. And it is one of my favorite speeches ever. And next week, I'm going to try to get one of these cards built. It basically has the authentic man definition on it. It has the faces of what it means to be a man. But on the back, and I call this the man card because it's got those pieces, but it's got this speech on the back. And I just want to read it to you because it really gives the heart of the warrior face. It's called Man in the Arena. And Theodore Roosevelt, again, he gave this speech. He said, it's not the critic that counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who actually does strive to do the deeds. who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with the cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And man, I hear that. I just want to go run through a wall somewhere. Just like, man, that is it. I want to be in the fight. I want to be in the process. I heard a college coach one time describe Saturday afternoon. He says, nowhere else in our country is there a place where you can see 11 men in desperate need of rest, watched and critiqued by thousands of people in desperate need of exercise. And it's like, wow. And I can see this over and over. I shared it before. My father-in-law took me to an Alabama game. He's an Alabama grad and very proud of it. And I was taken back by a couple realities that I observed. One, the stadium is packed. And I'm listening to people around me, but I'm in the process, and I realize I'm willing to bet less than 10% of the people in that stadium actually went to Alabama and graduated from college. And the other thing that really struck me is all around me I'm hearing these conversations about, we have won 16 national titles. We have a great team. We are going to win this SEC this year. We. And then kickoff happened. And the first series that Alabama went 3 and out, everyone around was like, well, you know what they ought to do? You know what they need to do? These experts who had bought a ticket are now superior to what the coaching staff has been and what they need to do. And that's the mindset of a warrior being on the field versus just a critic in the stands. And we have a society full of critics and lack this warrior heart. Well, the caricature of the warrior's heart, if you look at number 7, if a man's warrior face is pushed too far, he becomes abusive and harsh to those around him. That's the destroyer end. But on the other end, if the man does not have enough of the warrior face, he struggles with passivity, and he easily gives up and is quick to tap out or surrender. That's the wimp end. And to find that middle ground where, Lord, I want to have your heart in this is really the critical piece. So the warrior face is fight for what matters. And I want to give you one little aside. I want you to write this down, because if you've not seen this movie, it's a great opportunity right now, because it just showed up on Netflix, if you have Netflix. It's called Cinderella Man. And I was watching it for the umpteenth time. During my workouts, I just throw it up, and I'm telling you, the warrior face and the king face come out through that movie like nowhere else I've ever seen. But it's called Cinderella Man. It's a Russell Crowe movie, and it's a true story about a fighter back during the Depression, Jim Braddock, and to see the way he handles life that is just knocking him down, and the way he steps up with and for his family, and there's just so many great lines and scenes. I use it on Father's Day when I'm asked to speak on Father's Day. I'll use a clip from it, and I just say, women, ladies, you want to know what a man's heart desires from his wife, watch this movie. Watch Renee Zellweger. She is speaking into his heart what that warrior. You want a warrior? You want a king? This is the way it looks. This is who he is. So I would just write that in the margin. So here's the deal. I'm going to skip over the conclusion here. Well, we'll go ahead and do that. The king face and the warrior face are the first two of the manhood faces. And I want to discuss, though, the warrior face for a second. So the king and the warrior, so you can get your blanks filled in. But I want to talk about this discussion question, and then I want to wrap up with just a really cool reality of how God views us in this. He has planted these faces and these hearts in us, and he wants us to realize that he is the ultimate king and the ultimate warrior, and he wants to be that with and through us. And I'll share that at the end. But when you hear the title warrior, what or who comes to mind? What or who? William Wallace flashes in my face when I see that. But review the 4 qualities of the warrior on page 60, and it starts to list them there. And which quality is the most challenging to embody? Do you feel is the most challenging? And then compare the king and warrior face and share which one is more natural for you if you get to the third question. Okay? You got about 3 to 7 minutes, and then we will wrap them up. So ready, go. No, okay. Which one was the most challenging to embody? Which quality that's mentioned there? Initiative, protection, provision, perseverance. Which is the hardest to embody? I mean, just at your table, what did you discuss? Perseverance. I think by very nature of the word, that's the hardest one. It means persevere. Very cool. And then the last one, I hope you had a chance to talk about what's natural for you. I wanted to wrap up. One, I'm going to start here next week. If you have time afterwards, we are going to go grab breakfast somewhere and just chat and debrief or whatever. But that's just a really cool piece we've done every time. But two, I wanted to encourage you, if you get a chance to watch that movie at some point this week, if you have Netflix, it's just a great piece. I want you to come back, if you do watch it, what point stuck out from that movie? And what portion of it just really kind of hit you as like, oh, that was good. And then I wanted to wrap with this because I've thought about this situation, and college football is one of my favorite times of year. And I was watching and who's undefeated and who's going to go where. I got a buddy who's a big FSU fan and talking about who's going to be in the ACC championship. And North Carolina's undefeated and they're undefeated. And I thought, man, that's going to line up. They don't play during the season and all that. Well, I thought about North Carolina because the quarterback this past year, all these schools, because of the licensing thing that's out, were recruiting or tempting him, going, you're a great quarterback, come to our school, we can get you more money. And this kid, I can't imagine being 19 years old and having $1.5 million, $2 million worth of licensing and all that. I'm just like, wow. And I thought, I was so impressed that this kid, he said, you know what, my dream was to play in North Carolina. I'm staying in North Carolina. And what a cool piece that was. But then hit pause on that for a second. I've mentioned my friend Clyde before, Clyde Christensen. He was a college coach for about 20 years, and he was an NFL coach for about 15 to 18, I think. He was an offensive coordinator in Indianapolis. I was actually at the conference. I was invited to speak at this coaches. I would actually do a comedy show at a coaches convention in North Carolina, and that's where I met Clyde the first time. He was at Clemson. He was a quarterback coach. And he invited me to come do a thing with the team at Clemson, and just a great connection there. Well, the next year, we're back at this conference. I did it again, and I'm sitting there with him one night, and he's at the table, and somebody came up. It was after the show. We're doing dessert, and this guy comes up behind me and goes, hey, Ken, do you mind if I interrupt a minute? And I was like, sure. And I turned around. It was Tony Dungy. And I'm like, yeah, you can interrupt, you know. And Coach Dungy was the defensive coordinator at Minnesota at the time, and he said, hey, Clyde, I just got a call, and it looks like I'm going to get the job in Tampa. And I really want you and Debbie to come join us down there if I do. And he goes, man, that's congratulations. That's great. Well, 2 days later, I see on ESPN, Tony Dungy's the head coach in Tampa Bay, and Clyde and Debbie go down with him for years, and then they go to Indianapolis. And this is going to have a point here in a second, I promise. So he's there. He's the OC, but then he steps back. He goes, you know what? Quarterbacks are my thing. And he coached Peyton Manning. And the year he coached Peyton Manning as a quarterback coach, the highest statistical year of Peyton Manning's career, and they won the Super Bowl. And it's like, wow, that's cool. He goes to Miami, has a situation there that I shared in the men's thing, I think it was last time, where he turns Miami's offense around to the third most productive in the league. They go from 6-10 to 10-6, make the playoffs, gets demoted. And then after that year of demotion there and just really being faithful and seeing God do some incredible work, he gets a call from another coach who says, hey, we just signed the best quarterback in NFL history. I need you to come be the quarterback coach. So he goes to Tampa, back to Tampa, and coaches Tom Brady. And the year he coaches Tom Brady, he has now think about Tom Brady's career, the highest statistical year of his career, and they win the Super Bowl. And so that's Clyde. Now, Clyde has a football background. He was in the top 3 rated quarterbacks in the country coming out of high school. And he signed with BYU. BYU was a quarterback factory at the time. And I love him sharing his story. And he told me, but he says, I'm all ready to go and make my track. And he said, my dad just came. He says, Clyde, you're a man now, and it's your decision. But I just want to know, I've got a hesitation in my heart. I want you to pray about this. He says, I know your faith is strong, but going to a school where it's a Mormon school, and I just have a check in my spirit. And he said, so I did. And he said, I really respect my dad. I prayed, and I said, Dad, I'm going to lose a year of eligibility. What should I do? But I agree with you. I want to submit to your authority and your wisdom. And so he played junior college football for a year, won the junior college national championship, and then transferred to UNC. And he and his roommate were the only 2 transfers in. His roommate was a defensive player called Lawrence Taylor. I don't know if you've ever heard of Lawrence Taylor or not. He did pretty good in the NFL as well. But at UNC, he did really well, went straight into coaching. Well, Clyde he finished last year with the Buccaneers, and they had a coaching shift, and I lost track. Haven't talked to him. Well, I did a little digging, and it turns out he decided to take a year off, and guess where he is this year? He went back to his alma mater to volunteer to coach quarterbacks. Now, I want you to imagine if you're this young 19-year-old with a lot of talent that's just had a good year at UNC, and the coach comes in and says, you know what, we want to pour into you. And we want to bring in somebody. And he's volunteered to just come work with you. And Clyde is now working with Drake May at UNC as a volunteer. Now imagine being a 19-year-old and a guy who's coached Peyton Manning and Tom Brady came in and said, hey, I'm volunteering because I think you got potential. And I just want to walk beside you and help you out this year. How would that make you feel? That's worth more than any licensing fee you can ever sign. And it's like, wow. And I share that to say simply this. When we look at this face of a king and a warrior, the ultimate king and warrior says, hey, I want to walk with you in this. I've put these in you. These are not something you have to get. There's something you have to discover. And I want to walk with you and show you who I've made you to become the man that I created you to be the perfect balance of this and walk with you through that. And so I'm just really thankful that God is taking us through this. Next week, we're going to look at the lover and the friend faces and the seasons of life and what it looks like as we go through life and what season are we in and what's really important during that time. So it's going to be a great week next week to wrap it up. And I'm going to try to have, I call these the man card. I'm going to try to have these available so you can get one next week if you want. It makes a great bookmark. I've had mine for years now. But I hope you're having a great time. Thank you for the discussion time this morning. It was really, really good. And I just don't think we can get enough of that, especially in our society today, to be able to just realize, man. I'll close with this. The one quote that I love from this past week, listen to a podcast, and I have not read this book by C.S. Lewis. I got to go back and get it. But he gives a definition of a friend. And the definition is simply this. When you're talking to someone and you say, oh, you too? That's a friend. That we're on the same page. And that is so rare today. We have more ability and technology to communicate and less genuine communication than any other time in the history of the world. And so keep at it, and thanks for sharpening. Let me pray us out, and then look forward to seeing you guys next week. Father, thank you for this morning, for giving us another day. Guide and direct us, and we love you for the way you love us and that you want to walk with us. And Lord, we just pray that we would lean in, we would take your yoke upon us and learn from you and become the men you made us to be. And it is only through Christ we can pray. Amen.